Good afternoon, Chairperson Conway, can you hear us? Oh, he may be admitted still. Good afternoon, Chairperson Conway, can you hear us? Can the virtual world hear us?
I can hear you.
Okay, great, thank you.
I can hear you. This is Chairperson Stackhouse.
Yeah, I think we may be having some difficulty with one commissioner. So while that's happening, Co-Chair, do you mind if I ask you to kick it off?
No. Welcome to our June 19th Parks and Recreation Commission meeting. Get kicked off by taking a roll call. So we'll go down the list. Commissioner Martin, Commissioner Martin's now on. So can you hear us, Commissioner Martin? I know it's been a long day, I'm sorry. Commissioner Conway, you hear us?
Hello, I'm here.
All right, I'll turn it over to you then.
All right, sounds like we're doing some roll call, and I am here. Co-Chair Parsons.
I am present.
Commissioner Kerr.
Here.
Commissioner Martin.
Here.
Commissioner Rowden.
Here.
Commissioner Stackhouse.
Here.
And lastly, Commissioner McLeod. Sounds like maybe absent.
I think so.
All right. And is Councilmember Deborah Harris here today?
Yes, I am.
Wonderful. Hello again. All right, roll call has been completed. Let us now move into the approval of the minutes from the May 15th meeting. I was absent that day, but other commissioners who reviewed the materials provided in the minutes, are there any corrections or shall we move to approval? I see a hand up.
This is Commissioner Martin. On 5A, it says no increase in cost escalation since 2016. Was it 2016 or was it 2014 when the last cost was when these were increased? I thought it was 2014.
I think the last fee increase occurred in that 2014-2015 timeframe and then was revisited briefly, I think, at City Council where there was no appetite to increase again.
Okay. But it says no increase in cost escalation since 2016. Should that reflect 2014 then?
On our fee structure, I guess we could change that since it technically hasn't changed since its adoption.
That's the only change that I was going to suggest. Was after the change the year leading to 2014?
The year that they were actually
so that was
adopted.
when the year that was actually increased.
So it sounds like there's a request to change just to clear up the date time frame of the last actual approval of fees, which sounds like it was actually in 2014 was the last fee approval change as opposed to 2016. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's what I believe, and it seems like that's been confirmed. So I would make a motion to approve the minutes with that change.
Second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes with that one date change. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. We all think that that is a worthwhile change. Please go ahead and make that, and those minutes have been approved. Thank you. Now is the public participation part of this agenda, and I'm going to read this verbatim. This portion of the meeting is for items that are not on the agenda. The commission cannot act on items presented during the public participation of the agenda. The commission is prohibited by the open meeting law from discussing or considering the item until the item is officially placed on an agenda. And we ask that comments are limited to 5 minutes. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak as part of today's public participation for items that are not on the agenda? And once again, we cannot act on any of those items. And I did see a message pop up in the chat. Yes, we can. We're going to make a quick rearrange. Once we get to the discussion items, we are going to rearrange a few items, but open call for public participation. I do see some people, members of the public in there. You must be here for a certain item. Cool. Yeah. All right, let's move on. Per the request in the chat, we are going to actually just switch. We're going to move item 6 up to item 4. So the GOMA trail plan discussion, we're going to have that go on first as part of our discussion. So just a quick housekeeping on that. With that, I will invite, it looks like Mark, to speak on the GOMA trail plan discussion.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commission, for having us today. We'd like to do a brief presentation on the Greater Observatory Mesa area trail planning that is currently underway. And we'd like to reserve time for questions if anybody has any. So I will share my screen for the presentation and we'll get started.
Sounds great, thank you.
Can everybody see the presentation?
I see a blank screen.
Blank screen.
Do you guys see it better in the Aquaplex, or is that just me?
It's a blank screen.
Okay.
Apologies, let me try again.
Now we can see it.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Okay, so my name is Mark Loseth. I work for Southwest Decision Resources, and we have been working with Robert Wallace with the open space section on the Greater Observatory Mesa area trail plan. So quick timeline and background on kind of how we got to where we got to. In 2004, there was a voter approved bond that helped fund and support a Arizona State Parks and Trails Growing Smarter grant for a conservation easement. So this conservation easement was purchased from the Arizona State Lands Department and currently makes up what is the Observatory Mesa Natural Area, just west of Thorpe Park on the Mesa itself. Fast forward to 2018, 2019, we went through as a community a collaborative trail planning at a regional scale known as the Flagstaff Trails Initiative. That process went on for about 2 years. There were about 1,700 comments, 3 community meetings, a variety of sub-area planning teams. There was a core team of land managers involved, kind of developing what the community thought would be a good idea for a trail network on a regional scale. Through those efforts, about 5 priorities were developed that were relevant to Observatory Mesa itself. So here are the priorities that were developed and are included in the Regional Flagstaff Trails Initiative Plan. Real quickly, a new stacked loop system on the Mesa, meaning a variety of trail loops and connections that provides a various range of opportunities and lengths. Connecting the Fort Valley area with the Observatory Mesa. Adopting appropriate user-created trails on Lowell properties. Evaluating the user-created trails for restoration. This includes Lowell properties and Observatory Mesa Natural Area. And identifying a commuter route from the Foots trail connection on the northwest corner of Lowell Properties and Baderville. So using those priorities, we began working on updating and formalizing a new trail plan for the Greater Observatory Mesa area in 2021. We began working with land agencies to really develop a plan that kind of reflected the priorities from the last slide and making sure that they fit within, you know, legal and policy constraints from the Forest Service, City of Flagstaff Open Space Section, and Lowell Observatory properties. Last summer, we did our first community meeting of the first draft of the plan. And so out of that in-person community meeting and the online comment period that was held on the Flagstaff, City of Flagstaff Community Forum website, we received 585 comments. We took those 585 comments and we revised the plan. Once we had a new draft of that plan, we went out to what we refer to as our stakeholder or interested partner engagement process. There were 35 commissions, organizations, neighborhood associations, and others that were engaged directly to have, you know, specific conversations related to this plan, their reactions and what they supported and what they didn't necessarily like in the plan draft. We redrafted the plan and are now currently in our second public engagement process. Last week, we had our community meeting at the Aquaplex, I believe in the room that you all are sitting in now. And we will be continuing to solicit and hope for more online comments that'll go through July 16th of this year. Once we're finished with processing those comments and making any amendments to the plan that will make improvements to the plan, we will put the final version out for a final public review and commenting online prior to presenting to the City Council. Targeted for sometime in this fall, but we do not have an agenda item on a calendar for the City Council yet. So since the beginning, this has been a cross-jurisdictional process. So we've been working with Lowell Properties and the Forest Service throughout this process to make sure that everything was in alignment with their policies. Everything matched the idea of what they want to see for visitor use on this natural landscape, and making sure that we're adhering to all of the laws throughout all three of these agencies. So what's in the plan? On the right side of the screen, you can see our updated trail map that we have here. The dashed purple lines are conceptual trail alignments. So these have not been ground truthed in the field, but these are what we're targeting from a length and experience standpoint. And currently that sits at about 26 miles. Looking at restoring and obliterating 5 miles of user-created trails on this landscape, restoring 11 miles of existing road beds. So we'd be closing down these roads and trails using a variety of tactics. Soil decompaction, replacing organics, physically closing with vertical mulch, and signage to prevent motorized incursion on this landscape. 2 new access points were identified in the proposal to create a total of 6. 2 new parking areas. So currently the Mesa itself really only has 2 formal parking areas that I think you all are familiar with. One is Thorpe Park and the other one is the J.C. Montoya Center, both within Thorpe Park on the west side of downtown. So we looked at providing new access and new ways to get to the Mesa that, you know, as far as we were concerned, we were trying to provide good, positive, welcoming experiences for trail users, but we're also trying to limit conflict. And so we identified 2 areas for new parking areas that will hopefully not create, you know, issues with folks in residential neighborhoods near the Mesa. One of them is on the south, and on this screen, on the very south central part of this map, it's the little trailhead sign 2.21. And so this is the just west of the new public works yard on West 66. The city owns about 20 acres of property just west of there. Currently, it's kind of a big open meadow that could be a wonderful place to really create a nice trailhead and kind of advertise as the primary access point for Observatory Mesa. The other trailhead parking we identified is out on the western edge. It's point 1.3 on this slide on the map. And this is just the western boundary of Observatory Mesa Natural Area, just east of A1 Mountain. and A1 Mountain Road. And this is being proposed as a much smaller lot, a lot more unimproved. So think a gravel surface, much smaller, maybe fitting 10 or 12 cars, and a couple of potential horse trailers for equestrians. We've also identified 2 education zones. So both of these are adjacent to primary access points. So from Thorpe Park and from the proposed trailhead west of the Public Works Yard. And education areas are areas within 3 miles of a parking area that will provide interpretive signage kind of throughout the trail loop, a designated trail loop that allows for some experiential education. So whether that be, family units on a hike looking to learn something about the mesa itself, or, school groups getting bussed in to learn something in an outside environment, this is what these areas are intended for. Specific topics to be included in the education zone are currently undefined, but there's a lot of good ideas related to the natural history, the cultural history, the history of Lowell properties, and so on. We've also identified the commuter route that was one of the priorities in the FTI regional plan. So this commuter route is the red and white dashed line that you can see kind of coming from Baderville, following the western boundary of the map and moving east toward the Futz Trail connections. This is being proposed as an improved road. So these are existing road beds that we would look at improving drainage, improving surface, improving width. Some of the areas are really wide. They've seen some expansion from use over the years, and we'd be looking at really formalizing a nice consistent surface for commuters. Trails for adaptive riders. The south and south central portions of this map, it might be kind of difficult to see, but there are some teal buffer lines around some of the dashed purple lines. These are being proposed as adaptive trails, and these are for adaptive cycles. Adaptive cycles are mobility devices for folks not physically able to ride standard bicycles. And so what we're looking at as far as adaptive trail specifications is increasing the width from kind of your standard single track trail in the forest to about 36 inches or 3 feet wide, and some safety improvements to make sure that we're not creating tipping hazards, and a shoulder on the downhill edge of the trail to make sure that consequences remain low if somebody tips on these adaptive cycles. And then increasing wayfinding and regulatory signage. If anybody's familiar with the Mesa, they know that there's not a lot of signage up there, and that, trail junctions, allowed uses, trail etiquette messaging can all be major improvements to utilizing this area for outdoor recreation. And so quickly here, it's kind of awkward because my legends are in funky places, but on the left, this is the current existing conditions of Observatory Mesa. Red lines are existing roads, green lines are existing trails. And so we have this slide here so you can make a comparison between, what we have on the left, which is our current conditions, and what we are proposing on the right with trail and road restoration and closure, and also an expansion of trail opportunities with those dashed purple lines. So what's changed between the first draft and what we have now? We have some like larger kind of 40,000 foot view changes that we've been proposing for the second draft. And remember, this is a draft. These are all being proposed as potential actions to do on the Mesa. Nothing is approved and nothing is finalized yet. So long-term planning. Everything on this map in color has been bumped in the original draft of the plan. We basically split up all of the ideas for implementation into 3 priority phases. This version of the draft has a 4th chapter that we are now calling long-term planning. Some of the things that we had proposed in the first draft of the plan just aren't quite ready to move forward. It's not because of a lack of support, it's because that there will be quite a bit more time needed to really solidify planning for the implementation side of improving the Observatory Mesa for the folks that use it. And so you can see here, this pink polygon is Lowell-owned properties. And so Lowell is undertaking a strategic planning process and then a subsequent campus master planning process. And because they don't quite know where all of that is going to land, they were thinking that it would be better to really invest in the trail infrastructure once they have a better understanding about the land use out of these planning efforts. And so it's not that they're not supportive. Again, they do, totally support community members using their properties for outdoor recreation purposes, but they don't want to be formalizing trails and then potentially having to move them or close them down later. So understandable. We are basically planning on re-engaging with Lowell properties when the timing is more right. A couple other elements that are in long-term planning, you can see some dashed orange lines on the east side of Lowell properties. These are conceptual foots alignments. One of them is the Mars Hill alignment that kind of utilizes the old Lowell Observatory roadbed. And then up on the northeast section of Lowell properties, label is 5.23. This would be a reroute of that really steep portion on the Foots Mars Hill alignment. And neither of these have really undertaken any, cost estimating, looking at property ownership or easements, or really that far into discussions. And again, planning on re-engaging in the process with the Foots program when the timing is more appropriate. And finally, on the very south or bottom of this map, we've got 2 points that are labeled as access points. They're these triangles. These are both existing underpasses underneath the railroad. Folks from the Railroad Springs neighborhood and nearby communities are using these underpasses to access the mesa. And they're pretty great to kind of expand access and make it a little bit easier for some of the folks in these neighborhoods to get out into their natural spaces. Now, getting formal easements and making underpass improvements with the railroad is time consuming, right? And so, we didn't want to make any assumptions or communicate to the public that we will be, making these big infrastructure improvements to these underpasses until the timing is more appropriate, hence long-term planning. And so the adaptive biking, you can see here again, you kind of looking at this ability for adaptive cycles to access the mesa using these 36-inch trails. And again, these are all concentrated down on the southern and south central portions of the Observatory Mesa Natural Area, with the intent that formal parking be provided at the Public Works Yard on West 66. Note that trails that do not have the teal buffer line are currently in this version of the draft being proposed to be constructed at 24 inches. And so we'd have 2 trail widths and inevitably 2 trail types that we're proposing to implement. Advanced skills. So one of the highest volumes of comments we received during the first public comment period was that folks were looking for opportunities to use trails for advanced skills. And so we really heard from the community, and they were very specific in this area off of Foots Tunnel Springs. And so, here's kind of that southern border of the mesa. And the light blue lines identified are both user-created trails that exist currently on Observatory Mesa Natural Area property. 3.36 is a trail that mountain bikers really enjoy using downhill. Trail point 3.37 is a traversing trail, but it helps provide some connectivity to the area. So 3.36 was really identified as, this is one of the favorite trails for mountain bikers on the mesa, and we'd like to adopt it, make some improvements for sustainability, but allow folks to use it in more of a formal capacity. Currently, as far as providing trails for advanced skills, and think advanced skills as quick elevation change, think about a harder hike or a harder trail run going uphill, or more of a gravity-minded descent for mountain bikers. So this does not just pertain to mountain biking, but the draft plan is really intended to provide experiences for most audiences, right? And so the idea is that a lot of these trail alignments are going to have lower overall grades, lots of sustainable elements built into the trail tread themselves, but not necessarily providing that advanced opportunity that the community let us know that they are seeking in this area for trails. So the community meeting last week, we heard other comments as well, and these are kind of some more of these high-minded management type of asks. People that were asking about Class 1 e-bikes. So currently in the plan, we are proposing the trails for, what the Forest Service refers to as non-motorized uses. So mountain bikes, hiking, trail running, and equestrians. Class 1 e-bikes, just so everybody's on the same page here, they're battery powered, right? They're pedal assist only, meaning you have to pedal to engage the motor. They will help you pedal typically uphill up to 20 miles an hour, where the motor will kind of stop, assisting you in the efficiency of your pedaling. We are asking the community, what do you think about allowing Class 1 e-bikes on Observatory Mesa? They are currently not allowed on the natural surface trails that are, kind of the dirt trails in the woods. They are allowed on the Foots Trail alignments on the Mesa, the Foots Tunnel Springs and the Foots Mars Hill alignments. So trying to get a handle from the community on what their thinking is on expanding e-bike use to the rest of the Mesa. Adaptive bike trails, we have these proposed 7 miles, and we're wanting to get a sense of what people think. We've heard some thoughts on, 36-inch trails being a wonderful element to this trail plan. And we've also heard that, some folks really like that narrower trail, a little bit more intimate connection with their environment if they're able to use those trails in that way. And so trying to get a little bit better understanding on, where people think about the specifications and allowing these adaptive cycles. Adaptive cycles are allowed on non-motorized trails. They are considered mobility devices, much like a wheelchair is. What limits adaptive cycle use is the physical infrastructure. So if a gate opening isn't wide enough, if the trail is too narrow, the adaptive cycles aren't physically able to use these trails, even though they might be allowed. Single-use trails. So this is kind of getting back at that idea of advanced skills, right? And so currently we're proposing all trails as bi-directional and multi-use. So any allowed user can go either direction anytime they want. Trying to get a better handle on what the community thinks of, what about building trails for downhill mountain bike only? What does the community think? These are, management ideas and regulatory as far as constructing and signing and paying attention to these trails and how they're used. So trying to understand that a little bit better. And then we've also heard a variety of feedback kind of on both sides of this roads and or trails idea. Some folks really like their intimate experience in the woods with these, typical 24-inch single track trails. Other folks really enjoy the opportunity that the existing road beds provide, and being able to walk side by side, utilizing some of the flatter terrain to get a little bit more of a quiet and peaceful experience. So trying to understand, are we proposing enough trails, too many trails, just the right amount of trails? Do people like using the current road beds that they have now? So again, taking the pulse of the folks who are responding to this comments to help us with the final version of the draft. So we are in our public engagement process number 2. The survey is currently up on the City of Flagstaff Community Forum, and we really encourage all of the commissioners to fill out the survey and provide feedback, and also encourage the people that in town, friends, family, to do the same. We would like as many comments as possible. The goal currently is to triple the 585 to really try to get that pulse of the community. And one final slide that I added in here is this is possibly relevant and interesting to the Parks and Recreation Commission. As a part of the plan, we have this highlighted trail here. So this is the Thorpe Park Disc Golf Course. This highlighted, the cyan color, this is an existing roadbed used for administrative purposes, possibly the water line access. I'm not quite sure. I don't have all the information on that, but this is right off of that first switchback on Mars Hill Road, right where the old Saturn gates are and the original access to the Lowell Observatory. before the new road got built. People do use this trail right now. This goes through Thorpe Park, and we are recommending to adopt this trail formally into the system. So basically what that means is because this trail exists, we would be able to sign it and kind of show people where it is, how long it is, you know, how long of a walk it is from the Mars Hill Road to the Foots Mars Hill alignment. And this is intended to provide additional access to the folks that live just downhill in the neighborhood, downhill from here. The orangish, reddish buffer line that you can see around the disc golf course, this is a 300-foot buffer around the holes and the tees for the disc golf course. We learned from the Parks and Recreation staff that this is important to not create potential user conflict with folks playing disc golf and folks that could potentially be moving through the forest on a trail in a much faster way. So we created this buffer area around the disc golf course itself to get a better understanding on, you know, kind of how the trails that are being proposed for adoption, which are the green trails and this Scion trail on the map, kind of how they're interacting with the disc golf course and trying to figure out if we can, you know, mitigate or manage any risk that might be associated with adopting these trails. So with that, I will stop sharing and am happy to take any questions or have any discussion you all would like.
Mark, thank you so much. That was so thorough and just I'm impressed with the amount of thought you guys have put into this and thinking for that future and the adaptive sports and making sure that everything's been thought out. I mean, just and you know, that government process, you guys are just killing it, doing such an amazing job. So thank you for all that amazing work. Commissioners, I will open it up for questions. I do see a hand up. Go ahead. Sorry, my screen's really small. I can't exactly tell who's who over there.
This is Commissioner Martin. Thanks, Mark. That was a really great presentation. I really appreciate it. I just had a question on kind of what the proposed parking lot was going to be proposed for the area that is south of the Mesa, but west of the public sports yard. What does that look like? Because I know that is slated to be public, not public, but to be Parks and Recreation space for maybe possible future park development. What does that currently look like for that is proposed for that parking lot?
Currently undefined, Commissioner. I know that that's not super helpful to you, but you know, we're looking at that space and not, you know, necessarily using the entire 20 acres. 20 acres is a very big space, right? But we're really looking at it as a really good opportunity to really highlight the Mesa and really send, you know, car related traffic there. And so, you know, the vision, again, very much in draft mode, would be this welcoming environment with defined spaces, with a shade ramada, with a kiosk with maps and regulatory signage, like something that people want to be at. Knowing that it's a large space that has potential for other uses. Right now, where we're at in the plan, you know, we are admittedly pretty focused on the trail alignments and the, you know, kind of the human interface with that natural landscape. Trying to get there first before we undertake like parking improvements. And again, apologies. I know that's not very helpful to your question.
Yeah, I guess that was the only thing I had a question about, because I know that may be a part one day, so I didn't want them to conflict with each other. So
sure,
but
yeah,
we'll be patiently waiting, see how that comes out when that comes eventually.
Yeah, and that's a really great point, Commissioner. I think that needs to be thoughtful in the approach from the onset of the planning process for that specific area. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you though. Great presentation.
I see Council Member Harris has her hand raised. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Mark, great presentation. I appreciate that. I just wanted to ask a question. Are you concerned at all about e-bikes in the forest with potential for sparks and that kind of stuff with fire? Is anybody concerned about that, or am I too cautious?
And I don't think you're too cautious, Council Member. Thank you for that question. You know, as from sparks in the forest standpoint, so what I've learned about e-bikes is, you know, there are sometimes there has been fires related to charging the batteries once someone's home in their garage or their apartment or something like that. I'm not aware of any fires that the batteries themselves create. So beyond that, it would be, you know, sparks created from any other, or the same way that a standard bicycle would have to create sparks. And so I think, you know, from that standpoint, anything is always possible. And I think I don't want to read too much into your question, but, you know, thinking about volume of use and how many folks are in the woods and are they in the woods at the right time and acting responsibly is something that we'll be trying to address in, you know, kind of the signage and regulatory portion of the plan itself for the final draft.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Further questions from the commissioners? I do see a hand up from the public. Go ahead.
Question, are e-bikes actually classified as motorized bikes? I don't really understand the difference. They're quiet, aren't they? They don't make noise. And I know they go up to 20 miles an hour, but is that too fast or should there be the speed limit? Just curious.
Sure, yeah. E-bikes are considered motorized vehicles on Forest Service property. And that's a management stance that the Forest Service has taken, although there are a lot of opportunities to undergo special use permits to allow them in specific areas. For the state of Arizona, e-bikes are not considered motorized vehicles, class 1 and class 2. So those are both governed at that 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. They are not considered not motorized vehicles to the state. So we have a lot of competing management directions from the various levels of government, from the local, the state to the federal. So, you know, navigating that space is an ongoing conversation for sure. Gray area, basically.
All right, well, if there's no further questions, commissioners, staff, public, anybody, then I think you're off the hook. Thank you so much. That was an extremely well done presentation.
Thank you, Commission. We really appreciate your time today.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
All right, getting back into our agenda and the schedule, we will now go into the Flagstaff Regional Plan post SWOT update, please and thank you.
All right, can everyone hear me okay?
Got you loud and clear over here.
Wonderful. All right, I'm also going to share my screen. And if you could just confirm that you can see that, it should be a slide that says Flagstaff Regional Plan 2045 update.
We're good.
Great. All right. So my name is Jordan Hollinger. I'm the Associate Planner with the City of Flagstaff Comprehensive Planning Program and part of the core team working on the Flagstaff Regional Plan update. So this is a project that is taking our currently adopted plan, which has the date 2030, and updating it so that it reflects and looks out to 2045. And last year, you may remember that we came to you and we also went to about 20 other boards and commissions with the city and county and asked you to engage with us in a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats assessment. And we've taken that feedback, brought it forward into further public engagement efforts, and we've been working really closely with the public and are now at a pretty exciting time in the project. So we are just back here to update you as to where we are with the project and make sure that you have an opportunity to ask questions of us. So first, just to take you back to how we're kind of approaching this update process, at the start of the process, we identified sort of 4 distinct phases of plan development. We are currently in phase 2 of the plan update. Phase 1, which included the SWOT assessment with boards and commissions, was really about preparing background materials, producing informational webinars, collecting data, and talking with people in the community and listening to why people cared about the future of Flagstaff. We also tried to create art and excitement during this phase of the plan update process. And so we weren't just looking at analytics, but also engaging with people about why they care about the community and kind of their experiences and that kind of thing. So last fall, we moved into phase 2, and the theme of phase 2 is really about what's possible, or what's the vision for the future of Flagstaff. And what we'll talk a little bit about tonight is what we've been exploring in that space and what is to come in the near future. Because we are really close to actually putting pen to paper and starting to write the next regional plan, I'll cover a little bit about moving into phase 3 as well during the presentation. So as I mentioned last fall, we started phase 2 of the plan update process, and that consisted of a series of visioning workshops. So we held a total of 11 workshops, and we spread these out throughout the regional planning area, hoping to make it a more convenient exercise and opportunity for people to engage with us. Our central focal question for the workshops was think about where and how you live, work, and play in the Flagstaff region. How can we build a better community together that allows all community members of the region to thrive through 2045 and beyond? And during the workshops, we had 4 stations, and these included asking people about what their vision for the future was, to tell us what they thought about what sort of challenges or trade-offs we needed to consider as we plan for the future. We did an asset mapping exercise that asked people to identify things that they thought made our community strong. And then we also had a less structured activity called Talk with Your Neighbor, where people could just sit and discuss topics that they cared about. So in total, we had about 150 plus workshop participants. And then simultaneous to the workshops, we had a visioning survey that we had put out on the Flagstaff Community Forum that posed sort of similar questions that we addressed during the workshops, and ultimately asking people about what their vision of the future was. And we had 126 respondents to that survey. From the workshops and the survey, we heard a lot about what the community values, what they want to see for the future of the Flagstaff community, and ultimately what they see as sort of central themes that could or should be a part of the next regional plan. Probably the most frequently cited element of the Flagstaff community that people value is our natural environment, open spaces, parks, and ensuring that those things are preserved so that people can have access to them well into the future. We also heard about a desire for more transportation options outside of single occupancy vehicles, better housing options and more affordable housing, a hope for a more equitable future for Flagstaff residents, retaining our unique community character, and ensuring that City Council and Board of Supervisors are responsive to community needs and ultimately accountable to them as well. So moving from the conversation around sort of values and high level community visions, we're now in a process called scenario planning. And scenario planning is really about testing ideas and trying to understand how different ideas or policy directions may play out in the future. To do this, we are using a software called Urban Footprint, which is what we call a sketch modeling software. And what this type of program really allows us to do is test different ways of allocating growth and development in the region and sort of look at what that means for the community. So ultimately, we can say things like, if we are going to grow and we grow in this particular way, what does that mean for things like driving behavior or vehicle miles traveled, water consumption, housing prices, that sort of thing. So the modeling software has a large range of outputs that we can look at, and ultimately we'll be sharing that with the public as well. So in the scenario planning process, we formed what we are calling a technical advisory group, and they are really helping to advise staff and our consultants on the assumptions and data that we are bringing into the scenario planning process. Right now, we are in the process of that group looking over materials from a lot of our workshops and developing what we call scenario themes. And that sort of involves taking broad sets of ideas that came from our public participation, packaging them and sort of distilling them down into narratives in terms of growth and development that we can then model using the Urban Footprint software that I went over on the previous slide. So once we have finished creating the themes and model them, which will start to happen this summer, we'll bring those scenario themes and the model results back to the public so that they can see what each one means for the community. And an important element of scenario planning is that in addition to creating these sort of policy directive scenario themes that we're modeling, um, that sort of look at what if we do X or what if we do Y, we're also testing them against a scenario of a sort of quote, what if we do nothing, or maybe stated a different way, what if recent and past trends continue into the future? And that's, I think, one of the more powerful elements of scenario planning, really getting to test different policy directions against one another and against what we are currently doing as a community. So, as I mentioned, later this fall, we'll bring all of those scenarios and the results from the modeling back to the public so that they can see what each one means. Again, in terms of things like carbon neutrality, affordable housing, water use, and other things that we have as a community have identified as priority areas. So our technical advisory group that we call the TAG is made up of different types of experts. Many of the people on the list here on the right are experts in a particular field, while others are community experts who understand how this type of analysis and data can be compelling, or even perhaps tell a misleading story about the who and the why in our community. All of these people have volunteered to help us, and we pulled from a larger list of people with varying expertise. And we always like to remind people that this group is not deciding policy. They're not even deciding policy direction. They are just helping us to decide how we test what we hear from the community and how we can be as robust as possible in the scenario modeling process. So this group meets about once or twice a month. We record their meetings and put them on our project website with the opportunity for people to comment asynchronously. So while the technical advisory group has been working sort of on the back end, we've also been heavily engaged with the community with the idea of growth and sort of an uncertain future for Flagstaff. Earlier this spring, we hosted 13 workshops that we called Face the Future Flagstaff, including 5 that were held in very non-traditional workshop settings. So that included, we went to A New Living, which is a local transitional housing organization. The Northern Arizona Interfaith Council helped us host an all Spanish workshop, and that included many people that are not typically engaged in this type of process. We also held several workshops in classroom settings. We held one with the Flagstaff High School Native American and Hispanic Heritage Clubs, and we even held 2 workshops with one of the members of this commission, Austin Kerr, in 2 of his classes at Northland Prep. So just to talk a little bit more about the workshop itself, this wasn't sort of a typical workshop setting. We actually gamified what we call gamifying our planning and scenario work. So during the workshop, participants were broken up into groups of 5 or 6. They received a game board that was essentially a gridded map of the regional planning area. And then they were assigned 3 random, what we call challenge cards that had conditions pertaining to jobs and population growth, climate change impacts, and infrastructure funding. And the goal of the game was to allocate different types of growth or development so that it included things like residential, commercial, industrial. And so the goal was to allocate those different types of growth throughout the region under the random conditions that were created for the game. So what this really forced people to do was, instead of just sort of doing the typical approach of telling us where they did and didn't want growth, they had to think strategically given the constraints or the conditions of their particular game scenario. For example, in a scenario where a group had high population and jobs growth, but low future infrastructure funding, groups like that had to think about whether they needed to optimize new growth along existing infrastructure. And I think one of the things that's really powerful about doing scenario planning in this way is that it shakes up a lot of our assumptions and sort of predetermined ideas about what the future holds, and tasks us with solving challenges collectively. So out of this process, we created 60 maps and as well as detailed notes about how each group played the game and why they placed tokens in the way that they did. We are fortunate to have two really great interns in the comprehensive planning program, Sullivan Moore and Joseph O'Connell, who spent a couple weeks digitizing all of the map data as well as performing content analysis on the group discussion notes that we took during the workshops, and turned all of that information into usable data for our consultant team as well as our technical advisory group. So some of the major themes that we saw come out of the Face the Future workshops included sort of general support for the idea of complete neighborhoods or mixed use development, the kind of idea that supports multimodal access to services and amenities. We definitely also heard concerns about growth and what that means in terms of community character and displacement, and a real desire to sort of manage density as we go forward. We also heard further support for more transit, better road, and multimodal connectivity, um, and definitely a desire to try to mitigate congestion as well. And then, like we heard during the visioning workshops, we also heard a lot about protecting our open spaces, national forests, parks, and other natural amenities as well. So, from the visioning and the Face the Future workshops, as well as from an online survey that we had running right after the Face the Future workshops, our tag and consultant team have started to look at how we can package the growth ideas that have come out of those engagement efforts into these scenario themes that then we will start to build in our modeling software, Urban Footprint. So after this step, after we model the scenario themes, we will bring the results back to the community and have what we call a scenario choosing process. And this is where people will really get to weigh in on what they think about the scenarios and help us pick one that we can start creating the next regional plan around. So I mentioned toward the beginning of this presentation that part of this process is also creating what we call a business as usual model or business as usual scenario. And this model takes recent trends and extends them out to our modeling time horizon, which in this case is 2045. So our consultants have all they've pretty much finalized this model, and what we're really seeing is that if current trends continue, a lot of our issues here in Flagstaff get worse. Things like housing affordability certainly get worse, and then others we just see sort of stagnate or not sort of head in the direction that we have set policy direction for. So think carbon neutrality. If we kind of continue with current trends, we really don't move the needle on carbon neutrality a whole lot. So doing this type of modeling alongside our alternate scenarios, or kind of the ones that set policy direction, gives us a really good picture of a range of futures that could come to pass for the Flagstaff community. So just to quickly provide a few opportunities to get involved, or upcoming events that you can uh, join. The first one here is actually one that happened last week. We hosted an informational webinar that kind of went over some of the items that I've talked with you about today, as well as some of the business as usual scenario results. So I wanted to include that here because we did record it, and you can watch it on our website, and there's an opportunity to comment on what you heard during that webinar. Then next Monday at 6 p.m., we have an open house, which will again cover a lot of what the webinar covered. That's going to be here at City Hall. So please, if you have half an hour to spare, please come out to that to learn more about the regional plan and where we are with the process. We are currently scheduling our next TAG meeting, and that will be the first opportunity that our technical advisory group gets to look at initial ideas for scenario themes. So that'll be a really exciting meeting. And then sort of a little further down the line is our scenario choosing, which we think will happen in September or October. All right, so after we've sort of done all this work with the public, talking and listening and identifying the things that people care about, we actually have to start writing the plan. So that's the phase 3. And this will be kicked off by that scenario choosing process that I mentioned that will come later in this fall, September, October sort of time frame. In terms of writing the plan, the way we are doing this is that we are going to convene a city and county manager appointed committee to oversee the writing of the plan. And the way this works is as follows. So we've already received 34 community member nominations from City Council and the Board of Supervisors. And we are now working to create a staff report that will look at if there are any gaps of knowledge or demographic or geographic representativeness issues across those nominations. So we might have to readjust and ask for some additional nominations if that is not representative of our community. And then, so after we produce that report, the city and county managers will review it and ultimately invite around 20 members to the committee. Our hope is that the first committee meeting will take place in August or September of this year. And throughout the writing process, the group will meet 1 to 2 times per month. And I think it's important to note that since this is not a formal city or county commission in the way that your commission is, the committee will ultimately set its own rules on things like quorum requirements and operating procedures. I think one of the really cool things about having that type of committee oversee the plan is that they can operate differently than a normal board or commission. If they think we need additional workshops or public input on a particular item, they can organize that or have us organize that without sort of the typical structure where the public needs to, I don't know, stand at the dais and give their 3-minute public comment type of thing. So they can kind of set their own procedures and opportunities for additional engagement there. So from there, the plan will be created through kind of the framework that you see or the steps that you see here. Step 1, the committee and staff need to decide what the writing schedule is and ultimately what the objectives are for writing the plan. We to go along with that, we have to review the chosen scenario that we're doing later this fall and start crafting kind of the first step in actual writing the plan is to craft the land use chapter. And just to remember that the regional plan is kind of the central element is land use, and then sort of all the other goals and policies are organized around that idea of how we use our land. So once we work on the land use chapter and the framework for goals and policies relating to land use, we have to decide what other chapters and accompanying goals and policies we want to include in the plan. So we have certain things that are required by state law, but outside of that, are there other elements that we want to include? Then it's really about iteration until the committee feels ready to endorse a draft for legal and public review. And just a reminder that at the end of this process, once we have an endorsed plan for city residents, they will actually get to vote on the plan. All right, so that is all I have for this presentation. So thank you for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions. Stop sharing.
Go ahead, Commissioner Martin.
Go ahead, Commissioner Martin.
Hi, this is Commissioner Martin. Thank you for that presentation. It was very well thought out and sounds like you are heading in the right direction. I actually watched the webinar that you guys just hosted on the 15th, and it looked like you spoke about 5 different scenarios at that time. Have the scenarios have been drafted yet? Or because I'm kind of confused if those have been drafted.
Yeah, thank you. And this does get a little bit confusing. So thanks for that follow-up question. What was presented during the webinar, we are calling growth ideas. So these are ideas that came directly from our public engagement. And what we are doing is taking those ideas and we will package them into themes. So the actual scenario theme creation, so I think we presented 6 growth ideas during the webinar, and ultimately we will probably be modeling about 3 scenario themes in addition to the business as usual scenario. So those ideas that were presented during the webinar, think of them as getting packaged together, and that's what we will ultimately be modeling. If
Okay,
that
so
does that sort of make sense?
yeah, so those 6 themes that came from that webinar, you're going to be creating scenarios in which involve multiple of those ideas packaged together. Okay,
That's
that
correct.
was okay, perfect. That was my question, and that was what I was wondering. So thank you.
Yeah. Yep. Sure thing.
Additional comments, feedback, commissioners?
That's good.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I was just gonna ask, what is the thought on timing for all this, so getting it approved through council and then adopted?
Yeah, so we are thinking, our hope is that so between this fall and next summer, we will write a draft of the plan. So that's a pretty short window that we're going to work really hard to write the plan within that window. After which will come kind of the public comment period. Hopefully, if we can get there a little sooner, we will. But we are thinking that I think our ultimate goal is to have this on a ballot measure by 2025. So that's for City of Flagstaff residents. The Board of Supervisors approval. So just a reminder that the regional plan is an amendment to the Coconino County Comprehensive Plan, as well as the City of Flagstaff's general plan. So in terms of when the Board of Supervisors approves or votes to approve the plan, we hope that'll be around the same time frame.
And did you say this would be a ballot measure?
If yes, for City of Flagstaff residents. So the regional plan covers the City of Flagstaff, as well as several unincorporated communities that are outside of city limits. So that's Belmont, Doney Park, Timberline, Baderville, Kachina Village, Mountain Air. And so if you live in any of those areas, you will not get to vote on the plan. It will just be adopted by the Board of Supervisors.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and yeah, another thorough, well done presentation, great process. You guys are doing a lot of great work out there, so thank you so much. Great job engaging the diverse people you've engaged. That's how you get the best product. That you guys have the right mindset out there. I love it. Anybody else additional comments for Jordan? All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Yep, thank
really
you all.
Appreciate it.
Take care.
Wow, that bar is set high for these presentations today. I hate to see who comes next. All right, Citizen Cemetery and Ramada Rentals, please and thank you.
You had to go there, huh?
I didn't develop the schedule and put those standouts right there at the top. Like that's us. Tough act to follow, Amy.
All right, next agenda item, we are gonna cover 2 categories within our fee structure within the entire division, and that was identified last time to be the Citizen Cemetery and then our Ramada fees. So here's our first slide regarding the Citizen Cemetery fee structure. And everyone received the packets, and I did email them last month too, so you can always reference that if you need to, or you can always pull it up. But the biggest breakdown at the Citizen Cemetery for us is there's a column of fees for a resident and a column of fees for a non-resident. And I just chose 2 examples up here to put on this slide because there's a handful of other fees, but say for a casket, and then there's the fee for resident and non-resident or cremains, and that fee for resident or non-resident. I just wanted to make the note that current trends that we've been seeing the last few years is about a 60-40 split between casket burial services versus cremains at this particular cemetery. So then I started to pull some comparison cemeteries so that we could really dive into what do, these fees that were last adopted at that 2014, 2015 date and where we stand compared to others. One comparison site that stood out the most to us among staff, and it happens to be a location that's just adjacent to the Citizen Cemetery within NAU's campus, is the Calvary Cemetery. Now, it is a private cemetery, but Parks staff perform the digging operation there for the cemetery, so at a certain rate. So it's a very interesting one for us to compare and dive into. So when looking at their fees, say for just casket or cremains, they're on average about 50% greater than what we are at the Citizen Cemetery. So it's a very interesting thing when we're taking our resources, sending them over, so that's equipment and labor to perform, dig the hole, and then come back. But the rate that's being charged, that's Citizen, if you will, is at a much greater or substantial rate. That's the one that stands out the most to us in reviewing. It can be very difficult to find fees that actually exist, to find them readily available unless you start going through a process with that particular cemetery, to whether if it's an easement plot or for cremation or a niche, or there can be such a variety of options for loved ones. So chose just this one, and we can talk about it just in general, because I think we're going to see a theme throughout all these fees, whether if it's resident or non-resident at this location, that they're going to be 50% or greater is what other organizations are charging for the exact same service. So obviously from a staff perspective, the suggestion would be to increase both the resident and non-resident fees. And I'll focus a little bit on that non-resident piece. So what we're experiencing is we will get phone calls to perform services for individuals out of state or in other cities within the state of Arizona, knowing that we are even the least expensive for a non-resident. So someone not living within the city of the limits of city of Flagstaff. One thing that concerns staff would be that we've got this need for perpetual care out at the cemetery. Plus, as these maintenance direct costs continue to increase, so whether it's the cost of fuel, the cost of equipment, the cost of labor, you name it, those direct costs have continued to escalate over time. So that's also concerning too, when there's this perpetual care element to the cemetery itself. Hence the reason why we wanted to choose this as one of the first topics out of all of them to discuss, because it's pretty simple when you look at it. All those fees are codified from a rate study previously done, so it would need to be a part of a rate study when and if a future one is done for the division, with all of all the other rates included in that packet the commissioners received last month. So pretty interesting that we are fairly inexpensive compared to others, but still able to provide a very nice place and a nice location for the community and outside the community's loved ones. Any questions on the cemetery fee structure? Yes.
I have a question, I have a comment. Yeah, I was actually, I actually have a friend who works in the business, and I was able to ask for his opinion from being in the business and helping people provide, find these services. He said exactly what you were saying, that that the cost of using the services with Flagstaff Cemetery is the lowest he's ever seen, and that it is astonishing how low it is, and that while it is affordable, he said that it does reflect on the fact that the idea of moving a gate or the front entrance is kind of difficult to fund, because the ability of reoccurring those costs are so hard to get, especially like you said with that perpetual care. That whole entire fee structure is so that there's a rainy day fund for when eventually the cemetery does fill up and it does eventually become full. There is that fund so that will keep the grass and all the surroundings looking nice perpetually forever is the goal. That is a requirement. We do have a cemetery in town actually that has been abandoned. It's in the floodway on the east side of town, where people have been buried there. and it's been abandoned. So there is an example close to town. So I wanted to reiterate that. I did get an expert, I need an expert opinion, and he was saying, even for resident fees, he thought it would be reasonable around $3,000 to $5,000 total.
That is about the average.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, he's like, that's really the value. That is now. Now, whether or not we want to advise that we be the same as a commercial, we are a government entity. That is another subject, but that is something he mentioned.
Question.
Yes.
Has there ever been consideration of maybe structuring the fees so that they encourage people to return their loved ones in ways that require maybe a little bit less of a lengthy resource commitment in special care, for example, cremains versus caskets?
So, excellent question. So from a staff perspective, park staff are there to perform the services and maintain the property. Not necessarily, that's more of a mortuary, I think, discussion to have with that family. And there's also some measures that can be done that are different. So I really think that's a family decision rather than a guided decision from maintenance staff.
Yeah, I was just seeing as how staff would make instruction.
Oh, on the rate structure, so that would be an overall rate study would be performed on all of parks, recreation, and events rates. So that's the beginning discussions. We chose these first two topics out of all of ours, including the four recreation structure for events that are put on, whether they're signature events or private events put on or permitted events. So a rate study would need to be performed. There has not been one since about that 2014, 2015 era for our division. And then based on that study and those results, it is then a discussion with city council and then a decision of city councils on where to take those rates as far as dollar amount. Does that help answer it? Okay.
So council.
And then Councilmember Harris.
Go ahead, Councilmember Harris.
Hi. So I have a couple questions. First of all, I have a comment. It's kind of strange that people can afford to be buried here but not live here. So that's another whole topic of conversation. What exactly does the cremation fees cover? I thought when people were cremated, that their ashes were put into some type of an urn and the family took it, and that's not the case, correct? They still bury those ashes?
That option is available. So what we have out at this cemetery, say there was a family plot easement. So that easement in it, there was one casket in there. It has an opportunity for one cremation urn to be placed on top. Or I believe you can do, I believe 4 cremation urns in one plot easement. So that is what that fee is for. So if that urn is actually, if we are uncovering earth, placing something inside, recovering, and then obviously any sod, irrigation, any of those amenities associated with it. So that is what that fee structure is for. There is an additional fee. There is what is called a columbarium, where there's niches that an urn can be placed in. That is an additional fee on top of what's displayed on the screen right now.
I don't see anything on the screen other than a road.
Do you not see any of the, where it's got cremations and the $1,110 for a resident, $1,440 for a non-resident?
Yeah, I see those fees, but I thought you were talking about an urn. I thought you were showing a picture of something else other than the street and the fees.
Oh, no. Yeah, that's just an image of one of the roadways within our citizen cemetery.
Yeah. Okay. And so then, if a family chooses to have their loved ones cremated and they put it in the urn and take it home, they're not charged a fee, are they? From you or from us? Is that correct?
Correct, there's no fee, their fee would be with the mortuary and cremation.
Okay,
There's
okay,
no fee at the
okay.
cemetery, not leaving their loved one there.
Okay. And then, so you said that Calvary Cemetery is twice what we charge?
Correct.
Yeah. And so have we talked to them about, but we provide all their services, right?
We
The
do,
city.
we do their excavation work over there because they do not have that ability through an agreement.
Do,
we
do we also take care of the plots, you know, mow the grass, water, whatever? Do we do that or do they do that?
They do that, Councilmember Harris. City Parks does not do that action.
Okay, and then my final question is that have we talked to them about our costs and for them to maybe assume some more of that cost since they're charging so much?
Well, their cemetery is private, and privately owned versus this cemetery. So we have not engaged in any conversations with them regarding their fee structure or any of their feedback toward our fee structure on our property.
But we are charging them appropriately for our labor and machines and, I mean, you know, wear and tear on our equipment. Are we not?
That is all, that is an agreed upon cost. That is also a part of the overall fee structures of the Citizen Cemetery. The two that are displayed on the screen right now are just an example of two of them within a list of fee structure for the cemetery.
Okay, all right. And then for the non-resident, those are, I mean, people that are bringing people home to be buried or just people that are looking at the cost of internment and pick ours because we're the cheapest?
I believe what we are experiencing is that because we are the least expensive in the state, even at that non-resident rate, we do see services and plot easements purchased and then interments purchased from outside of the city limits at a high frequency because of that low rate.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I had a question. So the goal of us going through this fee structure is to maybe think about how the policy of what we would like to see from like return on investment, return on costs. Is that correct? Is the overall goal of going over through these fees?
For the cemeteries
Yes.
specific, I think so. You know, I think that we need to take a look because of that perpetual care piece and ongoing maintenance, or even just current maintenance practices. I do think we need to take a look at that. You know, are we interested from a city lens in making the cemetery revenue generating? Not so sure about that. How do you feel about that when we're talking about a cemetery? But there needs to be proper amounts of fees charged to cover those costs going out into the future, without a doubt. That perpetual fund that you referenced, Commissioner Martin. I don't think we need to be entertaining this as a revenue source, though.
I guess I would, putting some thought into this, I would propose that maybe in terms of a non-resident fee, maybe we should be seeking maybe 105, 110% of actual our costs in order to do those burials and those services. Maybe we should seek to make some money from that side of it. The fact that they're not resident. But maybe from the resident side, maybe we should be looking at some sort of at least a return, whether or not 100%, but even if it's around 70-75% on return on costs, I think that would be reasonable. If I was to propose something, that's what I have on thoughts on that.
Question. What is the overall capacity in helpful is the cemetery?
How full are we?
Percentage-wise.
It's a 36 acre property. There is still room for expansion. Our last expansion was in 2018, where we did 1 acre for an additional section for plots, and we have a new columbarium arriving next week, actually, to increase some of the cremation niches available as one of them starts to fill up. There is still room to expand within those 36 acres. How many acres? I don't have that exactly, because a lot of the space we still need for maneuverability and for a workspace, like a yard, if you will, for materials. We do, and there is, I think, a significant cost with it. In that image is great to me. On the left side of the image, you see the grass and the turf. On the right side is an older part where there is not irrigation and there is not turf. So those are also considerations for those future expansion pieces, where those that we've been doing in the past would include then that infrastructure of irrigation and turf on top. It's so 5 years ago, I think a 1 acre expansion was $85,000. I could assume that's going to be well over 150.
Yeah, I mean, if I remember correctly, when that came up, there was talk that the future expansion would be more expensive because of just the quality of the land, and the future expansion would be out. Like it's a rougher terrain, it's a rougher slope to fill in. So that future expansion to utilize is more expensive in the future.
Absolutely.
Inflation, but it's natural terrain.
How are the expansions normally funded then? Rates are so low, I imagine. Big funds.
We do not have a big fund there. They have been in the past a budget request from staff and funded via general fund.
I take it the perpetual care is separate.
I was just gonna jump in. Councilmember Harris asked a question in the chat that I'd like to get her the answer to. She asked where that abandoned cemetery is, and Councilmember Harris, it's down Old Walnut Canyon Road. It's called Peaceful Valley Cemetery. If you need more details, we can take you there.
I guess I don't know if it's my internet or what's happening there, but you sounded kind of mumbled when you told me where it was located.
It's down Old Walnut Canyon Road.
Okay, thank you.
On the south side of the road.
I think there's like a stone structure that's all that's left there.
Okay, thank you.
And you were asking Commissioner Martin about the perpetual care fund.
I'm assuming that is a separate fund.
It is a separate fund, so it's not a fund necessarily that Parks or even the Pros Division has access to pull from for expenses or expenditures at this location.
Okay, so then I need to take it that it's been set apart from the general fund as well?
Yes, it is. Any other questions on the cemetery fee structure?
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Just as a citizen, I wasn't aware that there were fees for the cemetery. I guess I assumed that was included in our tax base, naively, but we're talking about fees going up as high as maybe $5,000. What about people who, low-income people who just can't afford that? Is it possible to have a sliding scale or something? There are so many people in Flagstaff that, as Councilmember Harris said, can't afford to live here. I can just see them being hit not only with mortuary fees, but then $5,000 to bury them. That just seems
It's a high fee. I hear you loud and clear. I think that the difficult part for me to answer is that it's not a suggestion on where that fee would be from a rate study that would be developed from what other organizations.
But it is a far-fetched idea to have a sliding scale.
I don't know if anything's far-fetched any longer.
You're gonna think of ways for people to pay Flagstaff. I I'm gonna be composted, so I don't. Doesn't pertain to me, but really, that just seems really hard.
Understandably, yes. Anything else on cemetery fees? Right, we will move to, we took another somewhat easy one. We'll move to Ramada rental fees. So Ramada rental fees have 3 levels to them. There's an A, a B, and a C. And the rates displayed on the screen are a per hour rate. From what we see typically, there's typically a 2 to a 4 hour duration rental when someone is, has requested that and gone through the permit process. And those A, B, and C rates are based on size of Ramada capacity that they can enable. So as you can imagine, those that are in a level A are our bigger Ramadas at Thorpe, Bushmaster, and Foxglen Park. During the 2021 seasons, that would be from mid-April, or I'm sorry, April 30th. Is it April 1st? Thank you, Ms. Haley Reynolds. April 1st all the way through end of October for this Ramada rental season. 2021 was a little bit of an awkward one, peeling out of the pandemic on that. So we saw a little over 31,000 in fees were charged, and that was through 725 reservations. 2022, so just this last summer and the fall season, we had nearly $39,000 fees charged with 931 reservations. My gut says 2023 should mirror what we saw in 2022. 2022 is very similar to 2019 pre-pandemic. Our most popular use or rental locations are those level A's, as mentioned before. So that's at Thorpe Park, Foxglen, and Bushmaster Park. That's one of our Ramadas there at Bushmaster Park. So that is our fee structure, and we can toggle back and forth. There's two slides here on Ramada rentals. That's an image of one at Foxglen Park. So in doing a little comparison, say similar to the cemetery, took a look at what Coconino County Parks and Recreation charges. It's on average $75 for a 6-hour duration. So the county does not, they put in, I believe it's an 8 a.m. to a 1 p.m. or an 8 a.m. to a 2 p.m. and a 4 p.m. to a 10 p.m. Those are your 2 rental choices. It's not, here you go, you can have this Ramada whenever you want at this hour kind of thing. They also leave a 1-hour vacancy in there for staff to go clean. There is a post-cleaning charge of $75 per hour if a mess is left. So definitely a different structure than what we have in city park locations. You know, and when taking a look, say at a 2-hour rental on a level A Ramada, so one of those big ones, that's roughly $27 a fee charged to that. Where the full burden rate for a parks employee to say clean, manage the refuse in advance, possibly even afterwards, that would be $38 for 1 hour for one person. So that's a little lopsided, right? Just like the other location with the cemetery, a staff suggestion, you know, with a rate study would be to maybe we implement a 2-hour minimum or a range of times that are maybe 4-hour blocks or something, or we could go like a half day or a full day rental. You know, I don't think that there would be, with these rates and fees codified by city council, I don't think that there would be any need to go to council saying now and implement any of those adjustments, like a 2-hour minimum or a 4-hour block or whatever we might think would be adequate to do or to make sense, because, you know, I can tell you that on any given Saturday or Sunday, it's back-to-back Ramada rentals at all these locations in the level A's, B's, and C's. So there really isn't much time for us for staff to get in there and do much cleaning in between either. It can be mayhem. The rates themselves, those are codified by council, so would need to occur with that same holistic rate study. But I'm curious, you know, what could we implement to change this today, when you see that impact of, wow, I can get a 2-hour rental for $27 on a huge Ramada. But it's cost one park staff member $38 for an hour. It's pretty wild when you think about that. So happy to take, and I'll go back and forth between those. Any questions on Ramada?
What are the different style of laws or the other classes? What are those?
They're gonna be smaller in size and capacity.
So like Buckminster Southwest is like the giant one, has like I think it has like painted sunflowers on the columns. Yeah, that one is like a type A versus like the one in like Cheshire
Right.
is type C.
Yeah.
And how are those enforced? Like I live in Cheshire, so I see.
The first come, first serve.
Yeah, well, I don't even know if people pay the fee, you know, some people just go there and set up. So
They may not. They may not, you know, as you know, parks and recreation.
because there's no
centers
sign,
have officers.
there's no sign on that Ramada that indicates that they should be rented.
Right, so that is a suggestion, you know, I was just down in the valley at a park ranger consortium, which I saw some other municipalities, whether if it's on a QR code out in front of a Ramada, so anyone can walk by, scan it and see when it's rented. Still doesn't mean that there would be something to enforce
Right.
by someone else, because there could be that first come, first served usage going on without a doubt. You know, as far as staff are concerned, we know exactly, we print a report, send it out on Wednesday evenings to our park staff that here's where all the Ramada rentals are coming up, yep. So that they have an idea exactly where they are, but again, they're not gonna enforce if they see something going on that should not be going on, by all means, and if they can call police for assistance if needed.
Right.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
Yeah, if I could add to that, I think it's okay. I don't think we are requiring that anyone that ever uses a Ramada has to pay the fee. I'm not sure that we want to head that way. Amy and I haven't really talked about it, but it is intended, like, if it's free, there's no reason that someone can't go up and have a picnic. And that if you reserve it, you have a right to show them that you have the reservation, and others should vacate if they're there.
Yeah, so like a
That's-
birthday party,
Right,
reserving the right to have like that birthday party at that specific time and knowing that it's.
Knowing that it's yours, yeah,
Versus, you know.
that's what the fee is really
Oh, wow.
for. It's like knowing that I have this reserved and it's available.
I just see big parties down at Cheshire Park and I'm not sure that they reserved it or they just
Possibly
taken
not.
it over.
Yeah, possibly not, it's amenity at the park.
Yeah.
I did have a question, so, it sounds, I know like in years back past, where it's been really competitive to get these rentals off of some of these Ramadas, where I know people have lined outside the door to like wait for like April 1st or something like that, so they can get the right to that, to rent this Ramada that they do every year and stuff like that. Is that still the case? Are we, because that sounds like to me that we're at maximum capacity in terms of rentals, that we are maximizing the amount of rentals we could possibly have. Because people are, there's short supply. Is that correct?
You want to answer some of that, Haley? I see you.
Yeah, so to alleviate that issue along with staffing for that exact line on
Yeah.
the door. We open Ramada reservations for reservation April 1st on March 1st. So people can plan their birthday party that the Saturday module.
So that's like, so
It's
you
been
can.
less than an issue.
Okay.
You have a month to plan.
Okay, so that's, so if it's like May, if you wanted to rent out for June, you can wait till like the first.
No, you don't. So instead of I want to reserve it a Ramada for April 2nd and we don't open them until April 1st, you can now reserve March 1st or April 1st through October.
Okay, so it just made it easier for that.
Yeah.
But are we at maximum, what year maximum amount of rental?
That's subjective. I think some of our Ramadas are heavily used and others are not. But no, I think we're continuing to take reservations every single day. So.
Thank you. So the reason why I asked is because I know I want it to be high priced to where we are making some back of our fees. But I also don't want it to be outpriced where people don't feel like they're able to rent out a room. So it's just like that middle ground of where do we get some back some of their fees, so that way the city can pay its bills, and so that way we can have and maintain level of service. But also where we don't outprice people
Right.
as much as possible. So that's my concern. I like the idea of having a dedicated time for staff to be able to clean, to where maybe we like do minimum chunks of rentals. But I also like the flexibility of the per hour. You know, if you want it for 2 or 3 hours, you can, versus, you know, being forced into only a 2-hour rental, but if you want your party to do 4 hours, you know, that type of deal. So I kind of like that flexibility, but I think it would be nice for staff to be able to know we have a set hour to clean this, that is not 5 minutes. You know, someone's left a mess, and now we have another group coming in for another birthday party, but there's a whole mess and staff is trying to help the family clean up. I think that's unfair for the next person. So I think that would be nice if we could somehow come up with a system to make it easier for city staff and maybe less trips overall, because I can imagine that.
There are a lot of, yes.
Trying to go from Bushmasters to Cheshire to everywhere else.
There's a lot of that goes on, yes. We have a couple online questions.
Yes, Councilmember Harris, go ahead.
Yes, I had a question. Can people just go to the parks and lay down a blanket and have a party, or I mean, a picnic or whatever, without being under the Ramada?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so they can just find a tree and find a spot, and if they have all their stuff and they don't need it, they can still go, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I would say, Councilmember, the only caveat is if that space is rented to either a user group or an event. You know what I mean? So if there's a soccer camp going on at Fox Glen, it wouldn't be prudent to go set up your blanket in the middle of soccer camp.
Oh, yes, yes. Mhm.
And I just wanted to throw in just a couple more tidbits on the county, because I was there when we redid it all and changed it from whatever their system was before. I think it was maybe been hourly, just like the city. And through our cost recovery fee development exercise, working with the green play model, the pyramid of benefits, or so to speak. Anyway, to further complicate what we did at the county, because I'm no longer at County Parks and Rec, we also had prime time, weekend and holiday rates as well. So that was priced differently than a weekday, which you tend to find lower reservations, not as much, extra staff on weekends, or not as much extra staff needed, because the staff are typically working during the weekday to be able to turn over a Ramada. So when you do go forth and do a comprehensive development, I would highly encourage you guys to look at the use and the fact that people are tending to use them on weekends more. It's a little bit more competitive, and so when you're looking at the market rates and the cost and everything like that. So I will say though that we don't charge a $75 per hour cleaning fee, or at least I never, having overseen the Ramadas over there, we never actually did that. Charging somebody after the fact at a Ramada was just a fruitless exercise. So maybe that's on our fee schedule, but I know that we in practice did not employ that kind of cleaning charge at the county. So I just wanted to get those two things in there. In the interest of time, we do have one, I would imagine, fairly sizable update with the pickleball courts, and then liaison reports. So I want to make sure we are still being mindful of a 6 o'clock wrap up time here. So those are the end of my comments. I just wanted to kind of give a little bit more information on the county. And we also have different tiers, but more based on size than anything else. It's just capacity. But yeah.
An average, yeah. Yep.
Anybody else with other comments on this, the cemetery and Ramada rentals? There are no more slides, right? Those are the last of the slides.
Yeah. Told you it was a simple one.
It's a great presentation.
Yeah. Top notch, Amy. Well done.
I think we lost Commissioner Stackhouse, but I believe we still have Commissioner Rowdy, correct? Okay. Okay. Yeah, so I have no further questions, and we can by all means revisit that, because we're gonna continue to revisit all fees, and I think everybody's got a gist on what the future looks like on that when and if a fee study is performed on those rates that are a part of the pros division. Oh no, oh, he is here. Oh yeah, no, sorry, it's here. I don't have a presentation for pickleball. That was just so that we could, because this is our first time to meet since the May 16th city council meeting. So I just wanted to give an update of events that have occurred since on that. I do know we have some members of the public here, I think, for this agenda item too. So May 16th, presentation at city council, roughly, I think with public comments was about 3.5 hours. That evening, city council elected to move forward with the approval of the contract. It was a 6-1 vote. And to move forward with it for both the new courts and the overlay. Since then, and my dates may escape me, we had a citizens petition to reconsider that decision on May 16th. That was a fair item on, gosh, I think that was June 2nd at City Council, June 6th. Thank you, Audra. June 6th at City Council. That fair item needed at least 3 city council members to say, yes, let's discuss this in the future. That did occur on June 6th. So 3 council members said, yes, let's have a discussion in the future to reconsider the decision that was made on May 16th. There has also been a subsequent, another petition submitted since then from the pickleball group, and that petition will be another fair item heard on July 3rd. So coming up, and that is the last city council meeting before they go on summer recess. We are also in conversations, I have not seen it yet, and then I see that you've got your finger up, Chairperson Conway. We also, or maybe it always just has a spinner. There are some conversations regarding placing on the agenda the actual reconsideration discussion on July 3rd. Just had a meeting about that earlier this afternoon, but that has yet to be placed on the agenda, so I am cautious with that item. And my promise to the community, both those that are opposed to the pickleball courts and in favor of them at Bushmaster Park, they will receive communication from me if that is an item on the July 3rd City Council agenda. So right now, there is no movement whatsoever on the contract. There's been no contract signed with the contractor on it. No work has been tendered or anything like that on what was a part of that original proposal on May 16th.
So it sounds like we should just wait to see what city council decides.
So there may be a conversation on July 3rd regarding the reconsideration, and I'm guessing that's what folks here, if anyone wants to speak, by all means can speak to the commission regarding that. Go ahead.
So the contract then, does that have like an expiration date? Like, are we gonna screwed if ultimately council does say yes, but in a couple months from now, have we lost out on that opportunity and we have to like redo the whole thing, or?
Possibly, it's really unknown. So there is, again, no contract signed or agreed upon. There was a negotiated cost for it, and that is what was proposed that night on May 16th. That's really an unknown at this time. It's by not anything I can ask the contractor to hold their fixing on.
So the contract might change and that prices will inevitably go up if it will.
It could, yeah, certainly a possibility.
Okay.
Yeah.
No. But yeah, so it's just in a holding pattern. Yes. As a commission discussed, because we don't know until city council makes their decision.
That's correct. Yeah, I just wanted to be able to follow up on those events since then.
I have a question.
Sure.
Is staff recommending that sort of like the reconsideration be placed on the July 3rd?
It's not a recommendation necessarily based on staff. It may be a recommendation based honestly on city leadership and in council, because otherwise there's a summer recess
Yeah,
until August 28th.
that was my concern, like,
Yeah.
as you spoke about the contract, if you guys want to try and like get that talk about some rather than.
Sure, there's a benefit to that no matter what, but yeah, so.
Maybe I'm
Okay.
unclear about, so there is reconsideration of getting review to go forward.
So it's the actual discussion based on the June 6th notification or meeting, if you will. So it's the actual discussion with all 7 city council
It is
members. Yes, yeah, review to reconsider.
So they're really pushing to get it done before the council goes on.
There may be that, and as soon as I have that known and set in stone, I will make sure to communicate with everyone on it. Because if so, that date is July 3rd.
I guess I have a question for Council Member Harris. Okay. I just wanted to know, we have so much data to support our position on this. And I want to, because we're only allowed 3 minutes to speak at council meeting, I want to know the best way to get the important parts to council so that they absolutely hear it and consider it. Because I have a feeling that council doesn't understand or hasn't been totally informed about a lot of the things that we are trying to say, the reasons that we don't want this in Bushmaster Park. If, for instance, it's become accepted policy among cities and HOAs all over the country that they don't permit pickleball courts within 600 feet of the nearest residence. And there's no place in Bushmaster Park that would meet that criteria. And what you're planning to do is put the courts within less than 150 feet of my house of Audrey's, but all the people on the southern border of Bushmaster Park. So, you know, we were accused of trying to intimidate council and trying to threaten them with lawsuits because in order to change their minds, and as I've said so many times, it's not a threat, it is going to happen. So that is going to take some time as well. I really just, I hope council listens to the real facts about pickleball and why people are demanding that it not be built close to their homes. It really is a serious issue.
Sure.
I think that any citizen can provide information to the council. Just send it to the city clerk and she will distribute it to us. We get all of everything that's comes to us, we get it. In our mailboxes, in our emails, whatever. So if you have information that you think we don't have, you can send that to us and you can send it to the city clerk and ask her to distribute it to all city council members and the mayor and staff, and she will do that.
Thank you. We'll do that.
How much notice do you need for this to happen?
Did you hear that, Councilmember Harris?
Pardon me?
How much notice would you need for that to happen?
You know what? I think that because you all are in the room, I'm having a hard time understanding you. You're sounding a little muffled. So what, can you repeat the question?
How much notice would you need to have that information to you before the meeting?
How far in advance? A minute.
Okay. Well, you have to give us time to receive it. So if you give it to us tonight, the probability that we're going to get to it is not going to be good. So I would say give us at least a couple days. A week would be great. But you can't give it to us that morning and expect us to have read it for that 3 o'clock meeting, because most of the time we're going into an executive session, sometimes at 12 o'clock, and we're in there until the meeting. So we don't have a chance to read anything. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Go ahead. Yes, Commissioner, Councilmember, all along, we have been sending information through emails to all of you council members. And we're unsure because we did not receive a reply if you are actually reading the information. we've sent you many, many links since the day that we learned about this and started researching ourselves. And I think.
Well, well, I
all-
can, yeah, I can tell you this for me. I can't speak for other council members, but I do read every email. I do not necessarily respond, but given what you're saying, I can respond that says I received your email. So we received quite a few, and I just have chosen for people to know that we get those and that it's our responsibility to read them. And so you have to trust that that's what we're doing.
Thank you.
Any other questions on what's occurred since the last time we met or what may occur at a future council meeting?
I just have a clarifying question on the process. I apologize if this has been gone over before, but was there any sort of like discussion of planning this development about like the impact that would have on the community surrounding Bushmaster Park, and was that sort of like an informal report on?
So, not ask any questions if you would like. So Bushmaster Park is classified as a community level park, primarily due to some of the amenities that it existed in as well as size. It's not a rezone or any of those other maybe circumstances that kick in that need, whether to hold a public meeting, or we're not asking to put anything inside. We're asking to put a park amenity inside our park, kind of thing. So no, none of those meetings occurred or existed. What our division did do though is there are 78 residences that directly abut or adjacent to the park property itself. So those 78 residences did receive a postcard mailer around mid-March about this is coming forward, and that's primarily how the neighborhood was informed, at least that's what I've been told. And how it extended beyond even though say 78.
I guess my question was sort of like, it sounds like the neighborhood was informed, what was the neighborhood sort of like, in nature at the very least, sort of like, was there any research done on how it would impact the neighborhood beyond just sort of like, informing them that process was about to happen?
So the 8 dual strike courts have existed for almost 4 years. So since August of 2019. So, and that process also occurred without any information going out to the neighborhood. And there has not been much there's actually zero engagement until the postcard mailer came out for the new 8, because they would be in addition to the existing 8. But no, there really has not been any engagement in 4 years with the neighborhood.
Yeah, no, so, I just wanted to know if you can, because like, there are concerns about impacts, that have come up, and so I just want to know if they're considered sort of like, the development was planned, or if, there's any point about that from your institution. It sounds like.
So, and are you referencing noise impacts?
Not just noise impacts, I mean, like, I think there's like traffic impacts as well as sort of like, kind of like, direction.
Right, so no, I don't think, the courts in size if developed, would soak up a half acre of about 5 that are undeveloped. So it's not a large land development impact from that perspective. And then there are 2 parking lots. Gosh, at one point in time, I had counted how many spaces, but there are the 2 parking lots. There's 2 restrooms. There are existing amenities that could feasibly accommodate if, say, if every single park amenity was going at the same time, who knows what that place would look like, right? And then so no, but there's nothing like this triggers, say, a traffic impact analysis or a water sewer impact. And none of those items are triggered by something of this nature or size. Correct.
Just quickly, all those amenities are used on weekends all together, and the parking lot is overflowing, and it's frightening to see little kids out there among the traffic. There's not enough parking for all that goes on. But what I was going to reference was the 78 postcards. They were not asking for public input. They were saying, this is what's coming. This is a done deal.
Correct.
And, I listened to the gentleman talk about the regional and don't have a plan and whatnot, and they're actively soliciting input from the community. And every time that we've had any major changes to Bushmaster, that has happened. There have been neighborhood meetings, there have been advertising so that the whole community could provide input. And this time, I really feel like this was kept purposely under wraps so that nobody would know until it was too late. It just is not a democratic way to have done it. And I know that if you had put it out there for public input to start with, it would have immediately been shot down, and you would have had courts by now because the pickleball group would have focused on appropriate places and they would have found something by now and had it built. But Bushmaster is not the place. It shouldn't even be there. Our tennis and basketball courts are not able to be used by the neighborhood kids because it's just pickleball constantly on and on. They run the kids off, and Bushmaster is next to Siler Homes. It was built for the kids as much as anything. And until pickleball came along, those courts were used constantly by both kids playing basketball and tennis players. They were just full. And now I haven't seen the tennis player out there in I don't know how long. And the kids just sit patiently and wait, hoping that they get to play a little bit of basketball. That's the status right now.
And I'd like to reiterate some information that's in these articles that I just gave you. We've been told that nobody complained, and some of the council members said, no, we didn't get any complaints in the past about the pickleball injuries. Well, for one thing, pickleball has just incrementally been going up exponentially every year. As an example, a number, in 2022, it was reported that 8.9 million people in the US play pickleball. This year, it is 36.5 million. Currently, the courts are 325 to 450 feet roughly from my house. And Connie is just to the west of me, so that's relative. These new courts, these 8 dedicated courts will now be approximately 120 to 150 feet behind our homes in an L shape, which is not even like appropriate. They don't like the east-west orientation, whatever. And this is the best way that the Parks and Rec Department can squeeze in these courts in this little piece of what they're calling like real estate now. It is a beautiful green space with mature trees, and it's all about, this is going to impact our peaceful enjoyment of our property, period. And you'll see in this article that this man is a avid pickleball player, and he sees that there's a problem coast to coast. He started to see the articles, started to see the problems, and he said, I want to keep playing pickleball because courts are getting shut down in communities and there's lawsuits like crazy. So he's saying, back up, folks. This is what's going on. This is information for the whole country, for everybody, for every city, to get these courts done right and not impact the backs of peaceful neighborhoods. Please look at the information.
The gentleman that she's referring to is Bob Unitek. He's a retired engineer, Carnegie Mellon University professor. He has become a go-to source for information and diplomacy in the pickleball wars, studying everything from paddles to the placement of courts. He notes that pickleball hits have a high pitch with a frequency of 1.2 kHz, which is roughly the same frequency as the beeping noise from a garbage truck backing up. And why do garbage trucks use this frequency? It is the most annoying of all frequencies. It catches your attention. There are many, many experts who have come up with this kind of information. This one really caught my attention. And cities are basing their decisions on this kind of information, and they're no longer, residents are no longer just sitting back and letting pickleball come in and destroy their peaceful enjoyment of their homes. So that's where we are today.
And there are more appropriate
parks. There's a or park or sports park. Continental Sports Park, it's in the name. That's where the sports are at. There's softball, there's baseball. You know, that's where this needs to go. There's adequate parking in both of those. But there's also been brought up Fort Tuthill. That's a county park. But the mayor asked the staff to look into it. Apparently there was land offered by Fort Tuthill to the pickleball community.
We're still looking into it, still waiting for her reply to my inquiry.
So that's where it needs to go, where it won't, there's plenty of parking. It would be better for the pickleball people too. If they have, you know, where they have conferences, yeah, where they have
Tournaments.
Yes.
from out of town, and they'll have room to do that. At Bushmaster Park, they don't. They'll be filling that parking lot up and then parking on the streets and anywhere they can park.
That would be a mess.
Yeah.
But I was especially offended by some of the comments that when I listened to the stream of the council meeting last week. So many of the people were making public allegations and basically insults, and so many of those people were from Phoenix. They don't even live here. And it really is offensive to the one of the ladies commented that, well, it's only during the summertime, it'll be quiet during the winter. Well, I wait all winter long so I can get in my backyard and garden and enjoy my.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt real quick? I'm so sorry. I actually, and I apologize, really great discussion. I have a conflicting meeting at 6 o'clock that I have to get on, and we lost another council person or commissioner, excuse me. And so we no longer have quorum to really even facilitate the meeting going forward. Unfortunately, some other topics ran long, and as expected, this was going to be a meaty conversation, especially after I've read what I've read in the papers. But I do have to get to another board meeting starting here about 2 minutes ago. And so I have to leave, and I apologize, but I do think that wraps up this month's Parks and Rec Commission meeting. Perhaps we can get something on the agenda for the July meeting. It'll be after that July 3rd date, so maybe another update. We can make sure to prioritize this one so we have plenty of good discussion on this. But we just have to wrap up the official meeting part of today. And so I want to thank everybody for being here. We will see you at the July 17th meeting. Please let Parks and Rec staff know if there are items to go onto the agenda. And again, thank you so much. And I apologize for having to cut that short. I just have to run.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.